The bar, the leather, and the quiet man in the corner. It was just after 9 on a Friday night when the door of the Red Jug Tavern creaked open and a soft wind slipped in. The place was loud, packed with the usual mix of locals, weekend riders, and lost souls looking for something in their whiskey. The jukebox by the wall played old rock tunes, slightly distorted by years of spilled beer and cigarette smoke. Laughter rang out from a table near the pool table. Rough laughter, the kind that came from men who wore their bruises like trophies. A group of bikers had claimed that table hours earlier. Their jackets were marked with logos from a local club, known more for intimidation than kindness. They barked orders at the bartender, flirted crudely with anyone passing by, and shouted out stories meant to impress each other. They were the kind of men used to being the loudest in the room. So when a man walked in alone and quiet, no one noticed at first. He moved with slow grace, wearing a worn black hoodie, jeans, and boots that had seen thousands of miles. He wasn't big, and he wasn't trying to stand out. He didn't carry a swagger, nor did he challenge the air with his presence. He simply walked to the far end of the bar and sat on a stool, nodding once to the bartender. Somewhere in the corner, a woman gasped softly. A younger man narrowed his eyes. Was that him, Keanu Reeves? No one could be sure. Not in this light, not in a small bar tucked between a highway and a forgotten motel. Why would Keanu Reeves be here? But that night, something strange lingered in the air. It was as if the room knew something was about to change. As the quiet man sipped his tea, yes, tea, the loudest of the bikers, a tall man called Bruno with arms like tree trunks and a voice like a chainsaw, stood up. He was already tipsy. He'd won 2 rounds of pool and lost 1, and he didn't like losing. His pride was bruised. He needed a target. His eyes locked on the quiet man in the corner. "Hey, hoodie," Bruno called out, the bar quieting just a bit. "What are you drinking, warm milk?" The men around him laughed. The bartender stiffened but said nothing. The quiet man looked up slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply blinked. "Just tea," the man said softly. Bruno snorted. "Tea?" He walked over, boots stomping on the wooden floor. "This ain't some yoga retreat, old man. This is a bar, where real men drink real things." Still, the man said nothing more. He took another sip. The tension climbed. One of the younger bikers nudged Bruno. "Come on, man, leave him." But Bruno had already decided. He leaned in closer, placing one large hand on the bar, the other tapping the man's shoulder. "What are you hiding under that hood anyway?" The man turned his head slowly, and, in that one moment, just a glance, the room changed. A few people blinked in shock. "No way," someone whispered. "That's him. That's Keanu Reeves." Bruno laughed. "Oh, sure. And I'm Johnny Depp." He reached for the hood, trying to yank it back. That's when the bartender finally stepped in, her voice sharp. "Bruno, don't." But it was too late. With one fluid motion, the quiet man caught Bruno's hand mid-air, his fingers like steel wrapped in silk. He didn't twist. He didn't hurt him. He simply held it there, gently, with eyes so calm, it was frightening. "I don't want trouble," the man said. Bruno tried to pull his hand back but couldn't. Something in him faltered, something primal. There was a strange force behind this man's stillness, a storm that didn't rage. It watched. After a tense second, the man let go. Bruno stumbled back, looking confused, almost embarrassed. The bar was silent now. The man turned back to his tea, lifting the cup with grace. He didn't gloat. He didn't mock. He just resumed drinking like nothing had happened. The bartender moved over and whispered something to him. He nodded once. Words spread quickly. Whispers turned into certainty. Phones were taken out discreetly. One man zoomed in and compared a photo on his screen. It was Keanu. No doubt. But why was he here? A woman sitting by the jukebox stood up and walked over. She was older, maybe in her 50s, wearing a weathered leather vest and denim skirt. She stopped a few steps away. "You helped my son?" she said softly. "Years ago, at a bike rally in Arizona, you gave him water and stayed with him after he fainted. You didn't tell anyone who you were." Keanu looked up. He gave her a faint, warm smile. "I remember." He was scared. "He still talks about it," she said, voice trembling. "You gave him your sunglasses." Keanu nodded again, then looked down. The bikers at the table didn't know what to do. Some of them stared in disbelief. Bruno, red-faced, returned to his chair, shaken. But the night wasn't over, because a man stepped into the bar just then. Someone who'd been looking for Bruno. Someone with rage in his heart and violence in his hands. The man's name was Dalton. He wore a black leather coat, carried an old grudge, and his presence made even the jukebox skip. And as Dalton's eyes scanned the room, landing on Bruno and then briefly on the man in the hoodie, something shifted again. But what Dalton didn't know, what none of them knew, was that tonight wasn't about revenge, it was about revelation. And Keanu Reeves had not come here by accident. The man in black and the memories they buried, Dalton didn't walk into the Red Jug Tavern like a man entering a bar. He walked in like he was crashing through time. His boots thudded heavy, the door slammed hard. Behind him, and for one split second, the entire place seemed to exhale. Even the jukebox, which had survived years of spilled drinks and drunks punching buttons, gave out a small crackle and went quiet. Heads turned slowly, cautiously. And when they saw him, most of them lowered their eyes. Dalton wasn't part of any club, not anymore. Years ago, he'd been thrown out of 3 for reasons that people still whispered about. Too violent, too unpredictable, too obsessed with proving something that no one could quite name. He was tall, wiry, and his face looked like it had been carved out of stone and left in a storm. His right hand always twitched near his side, close to the old chain he carried instead of a belt, and when he walked in, people remembered stories they didn't want to remember. Bruno's laughter had stopped. The rest of the bikers stiffened. No one greeted Dalton. No one dared, but Keanu didn't even look up. He remained seated, sipping what remained of his tea, calm like a man listening to distant waves while the wind tried to tear down his house. Dalton's eyes swept the room. They found Bruno, who sat slumped and uneasy, then darted to the man in the hoodie, Keanu, and lingered there just a little too long. There was recognition in his stare, but also confusion. It was like seeing a ghost wearing the wrong face. "You," Dalton said, his voice low and cracked. "You ain't from around here." Keanu finally lifted his head. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked into Dalton's eyes, and what Dalton saw there made something shift in his stance. He didn't step back, but he blinked. "Once, I've been here before," Keanu replied softly, "but that was a long time ago." Bruno stood up now, trying to reclaim some power, trying to mask his earlier humiliation. "Dalton, this guy's some Hollywood reject. Came in here drinking tea like he owns the place." Keanu didn't look at Bruno, but Dalton's eyes narrowed. His hand twitched near the chain. "What's your name?" Dalton asked. "Does it matter?" Keanu replied. That answer made the bar suck in air again. No one talked to Dalton like that. Not unless they wanted scars they couldn't cover, but Dalton didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer. The space between them shrank. Keanu stood slowly, not in a threatening way, but with an old patience, like someone used to facing storms. "You look like someone I used to know," Dalton said. "Back when I rode through Nevada, we were younger. We thought we'd live forever. He wasn't famous then, but he did something no one else did." Keanu didn't answer, but something flickered in his eyes. A memory. A shadow. "He stopped a fight between 2 brothers, Dalton continued, voice quieter now. They were about to kill each other over a stolen bike, and he just stood between them. Calm. Said the kind of thing that makes you want to listen. Made us all feel small in a good way. And then he left." Dalton stared at him. "That you?" Keanu gave a slow nod. "That was me." A wave of silence rolled through the bar again. No one breathed. Even the jukebox stayed quiet, as if it too was listening. Dalton exhaled, but not like a man releasing tension. It was more like a man releasing grief. "That day changed me," Dalton said. But I changed back. Forgot who I was supposed to be. Lost the road. Keanu didn't preach. He didn't judge. He simply said, "It's never too late to remember." But Bruno was losing patience. His ego had taken 2 hits now. Once from a stranger, and now from a man he used to fear. He shoved his chair back and growled, "This is a bar, not a therapy circle." Dalton turned toward him, and for the first time in years, someone silenced Bruno with a look. Dalton's stare was colder than any punch. "Sit down," he said. Bruno obeyed. But the night wasn't done shifting. A young woman came in next. She wore a dusty jacket, had tired eyes, and carried a large duffel bag. Her name was Lucy, and she was looking for someone. Not a father, not a brother, but something harder to name. She glanced around the room, and her eyes widened when she saw Keanu. She walked straight to him. Didn't hesitate. Didn't blink. "You don't know me," she said. "But my mom, she told me about you. You helped her years ago, in a snowstorm outside Flagstaff. She never forgot. She said if I ever felt lost, to find you." Keanu looked at her with gentle confusion. "Your mom's name?" "Diana." "Diana." He paused, then smiled almost brokenly. "She used to drive an old pickup, green one." Lucy nodded. He looked at her, really looked, and then said, "You found me." The bar was no longer a bar. It had become something else. A place of ghosts, of roads crossing again after years in the dark. Dalton, Bruno, Lucy, all drawn here by something that wasn't chance. But before anything else could be said, headlights filled the front windows. Engines, voices outside. A group of riders, loud, mean, and unfamiliar. They weren't from around here. Their jackets had a symbol no one recognized. The door creaked again. And with it, a new storm walked in. The kind that wouldn't end with words. Keanu turned toward the entrance, shoulders steady, eyes sharp. This wasn't the past knocking. This was something else. The storm they didn't see coming, the wind outside had picked up. It howled low like a warning dog just before the bite. The Red Jug Tavern stood still, frozen in a hush that didn't belong in a place like this. Inside, every head slowly turned toward the door, where the silhouettes of unfamiliar men stretched, long against the floor. There were 5 of them, bikers, no question, but not like Bruno and his crew. These men moved like wolves, not loud, not boastful, just dangerous in a way you could feel in your teeth. Keanu didn't move. He stood there, with Lucy just behind him, Dalton to his right and Bruno still stuck in place by fear and pride. The door pushed open with a slow creak and the first man stepped through. He had silver hair tied in a tight knot and scars that ran down both sides of his neck like claw marks. Behind him, the others followed, silent, sharp-eyed, and armed, with more than just threats. Their jackets bore a red skull emblem no one in the room had seen before. But that emblem, it didn't feel new. It felt ancient, repainted from something worse. The silver-haired man scanned the bar, his gaze landing first on Keanu, then on Dalton. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that warmed a room. It was the kind that cracked ice. "Yamal, remember me?" he asked, voice low like gravel dragged across pavement. Dalton swallowed hard. He stepped forward half a pace, his boots suddenly unsure beneath him. "Victor," Dalton said quietly, "you were locked up." Victor's smile widened. "Were." The silence stretched again. Even the air seemed reluctant to move. The bartender slowly reached below the counter, probably for the old bat she kept just in case, but Keanu raised one hand gently without turning around. "Don't," he said softly. "Not yet." Victor's eyes flicked to Keanu, sharp and curious. "And who are you supposed to be?" Before anyone could answer, Bruno snorted. "Some movie star wannabe, drinks tea, thinks he's a monk." Victor raised an eyebrow. "A monk?" Keanu stepped forward now, just one step, but it changed everything. The energy in the room shifted. The walls leaned in, His presence wasn't violent, but it was powerful in a way no shouting man could match. He looked Victor in the eye, steady, unafraid. "I'm someone who's seen too much blood over pride," Keanu said, "and I'm not in the mood to see more tonight." Victor blinked, then laughed once, short, dark. "You've got the wrong bar, pacifist." Lucy stepped up beside Keanu, her voice clear. "He's not trying to start a fight, but he's not walking away from one either." The room held its breath. Dalton moved closer now, his voice rough with old scars. "Victor, don't do this. You want something, say it." Victor's smile faded. "I want what you owe me. I want what your crew stole, and I want respect. All of it. Starting now." Bruno tried to recover his tough guy act, stepping forward. "This is our place, not yours." Victor turned to him, almost amused. "Then defend it." With a sudden flick of his wrist, Victor pulled a long, thin blade from his sleeve. It gleamed in the dim bar light, cruel and polished. His men spread out behind him, not pulling weapons, not yet, but their eyes said everything. Keanu didn't reach for anything. He didn't square his stance like a boxer or make threats like a fighter. He just stood there and breathed, calm, as a monk before a storm. "Violence is easy," Keanu said, voice low. "Restraint takes strength." Victor looked him up and down. "You speak like a man who's never been beaten to his knees." Keanu's eyes turned dark. Not angry, not cold, but deep. "I've buried more friends than you've had drinks, and I've been to my knees more times than I care to count. But standing back up, that's the lesson." Dalton stepped forward, chest rising, fists clenched. "You want to fight, Victor? Fine. But it ends here." Victor smiled. "Good, because..." We brought a message, and then chaos broke. One of Victor's men lunged, not at Dalton, but toward Lucy. A calculated move, hit the heart of the group. Keanu moved so fast it didn't look real. He didn't punch. He didn't kick. He flowed like water, redirected the man's arm, twisted his balance, and brought him down with almost no sound. It was surgical, not showy. Brutal in its elegance. Lucy gasped. Bruno stumbled backward. The bartender ducked. Dalton charged Victor. They slammed into a table, bottles crashing around them. Fists flew, curses shouted, people scrambled. But Keanu didn't lose focus. Another biker came at him faster this time, knife flashing. Keanu dodged, stepped aside, grabbed the wrist, turned it just enough for the weapon to drop, and pushed the man into a chair with controlled force. It was like watching stillness dismantle rage. Victor and Dalton were locked in a violent dance, old scores fueling each hit. The room trembled with raw emotion. Not just violence, but grief. Regret. Years of anger buried under masks of pride. Finally, Victor pulled back, breath ragged. He grabbed a bottle, raised it, ready to end the fight. But Keanu stepped between them. "Enough," Victor snarled. "You don't get to decide." Keanu didn't flinch. "I don't want to decide, but someone has to stop the cycle." Victor's chest heaved. His men were on the ground, bruised, winded, humiliated not by being beaten, but by being defeated without ego. Keanu stepped closer. "You want to lead men? Then show them there's a different way." Victor stared at him, then looked around the room. His men were watching. His power was cracked. He lowered the bottle. No one cheered. No applause. Just silence. Deep, raw silence. Victor looked at Dalton. "You still owe me." Dalton wiped blood from his lip. "I know." Victor turned toward the door, pausing only, once to glance back at Keanu. "You're not what I expected." "No one is," Keanu said, and then Victor left. His men followed. The Red Jug Tavern stood still again, but this time it felt different. Like something heavy had been lifted. Like breath returning after a long-held tension. Lucy looked at Keanu, eyes wide. How did you learn to do that?" He smiled gently. "Pain teaches. Kindness reminds." Dalton sat down, spent. You saved us all tonight. But Keanu shook his head. No. I reminded you of who you were before you forgot. The jukebox crackled back to life. And outside, the storm finally passed. But deep in the shadows, someone had been watching the whole time. Someone who wasn't ready to let go of the past. Someone who knew Keanu Reeves wasn't done being tested. Echoes of the past and the stranger at the gate. The Red Jug Tavern didn't sleep that night. Even after Victor and his crew vanished into the black highway, even after the jukebox returned to its lazy hum and the scent of spilled whiskey faded into old wood, the people inside stayed restless. They didn't speak much. A few clapped Dalton on the back. Some approached Keanu with unsure eyes, wanting to say something, anything but falling silent. Because how do you thank a man who just shattered violence with stillness? How do you look into the face of a stranger who somehow sees right through you? Keanu stayed quiet. He helped the bartender upright a fallen stool. He helped Lucy find her bag and walked her to a back booth where she could rest her trembling legs. Then he sat down beside her. Not as a bodyguard, not as a hero, just as a man who'd seen too much. Lucy stared down at the tea he'd made for her. She hadn't said much since Victor left. Now her voice cracked through the quiet. How did you know my mom? Keanu didn't answer right away. His fingers traced the rim of his cup, eyes soft but far away. Flagstaff, snowstorm. She had a flat tire just outside a rest stop. I was coming back from a shoot, but I wasn't in costume. She thought I was just some guy with a rusty car. Lucy half smiled. She never told me that part. Keanu chuckled softly. She was freezing. Her hands were shaking so bad she dropped the wrench. I fixed the tire. We didn't talk much. Just enough. But I saw something in her eyes. Like she was holding the whole world together with 2 fingers. Lucy's eyes shimmered. She always did. He nodded. She gave me her scarf before I left. Told me it was lucky. I still have it. And then he paused. Because something changed in the air again. Not a shift of threat. Something deeper. Older. The door opened slowly. This time it didn't crash. Or bang. It moved gently, pushed by wind that didn't seem to exist outside. And in stepped an old man with gray braids and dark eyes that looked carved from time itself. He wore a weathered jacket with beads on the cuffs and carried a wooden cane, though he didn't lean on it. Dalton saw him first. And stood up. Old Crow, Dalton said, voice respectful. The old man nodded. I heard there was trouble. Bruno stepped back, uncertain. He didn't like Old Crow. No one did. But they respected him. He was one of the last of the old guardians, men who weren't in clubs, who didn't ride for power, but for purpose. Old Crow had been around when the Red Jug first opened, when the town was just dirt and dust and dreams. Keanu stood up. Old Crow's eyes found him and stayed there. I know you. Keanu tilted his head. Have we met? Not in this life, Old Crow said. Then looked around. But I've heard your name whispered in places where silence lives. The bar went quiet again. Like it was waiting for something, Old Crow stepped forward and tapped his cane once on the ground. You stopped blood from spilling tonight, he said. But blood remembers. It stains deeper than skin. And someone is still coming. Someone who wants you broken, not bruised. Keanu's voice was steady. Victor? Old Crow shook his head. Victor's not the root. He's just a branch that grew from hate. Lucy leaned forward. Who's coming? The old man looked at her and his voice softened. A man who thinks Keanu Reeves took everything from him. Keanu blinked, his hands slowly folded. I've tried to live without taking, only giving. Not to him, Old Crow said. To him, your kindness was a wound, and now he wants to close it with fire. The room shivered. Dalton walked over. Who is he? Old Crow turned to Keanu. You know him, not by name, but by memory. And just like that, it started to return. A face, a moment, a decision made years ago that felt small at the time. A man turned away from a film set banned for stealing. Keanu had spoken with him privately, tried to help. The man had raged. Security removed him. It was forgotten in a week, but not by him. Not by Reese Milton, a failed stuntman. A man who blamed everyone but himself. A man who once stood inches from fame but was swallowed by resentment. Keanu, whispered. Reese. Old Crow nodded. He's coming, he said. And he's bringing more than fists. He's bringing fire. Bruno scoffed, still trying to keep his cool. So what? He's just another angry man. But Keanu looked at him. He's more than that. He's the kind who lets anger become mission. And when that happens, it spreads. Dalton walked to the door, stared into the night. Then we stop him. But Old Crow raised a hand. You don't understand. He's not attacking just this bar. He wants to break Keanu down in front of everyone, humiliate him, show the world the quiet man isn't strong. Lucy stood up. He's wrong. Kindness isn't weakness. Keanu looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. But most people don't see it that way. The room stood in stillness. Even the clock behind the bar seemed to tick louder. Then Keanu stepped forward. Where is he? Old Crow answered with a whisper. He'll be here by dawn. And just like that, the clock began its final countdown. Outside, the night stretched longer. Inside, the tavern turned into a place of preparation, not for a fight of fists, but of something harder, a battle for dignity, for compassion, for the strength it takes to remain gentle in a world that worships cruelty. The night was not over, and Reese was already on the road. Fire in the distance and the weight of the morning. The town of Marlow had never truly known silence, but that night came close. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence that follows a song or drapes over sleepy rooftops. It was the tense kind, the kind that grows between people waiting for something they can't describe. The Red Jug Tavern was still open, though no drinks were poured, no music played, and no games were running. It had become something else entirely, a waiting room between two storms. Keanu stood alone near the back window, staring out across the empty street. A streetlight buzzed overhead, flickering now and then as if nervous about what was coming. Across the road, dogs barked and then fell quiet. A woman walking her baby earlier had long since gone home and locked her doors. Even the air outside felt heavier, like it was bracing itself. He had faced pain before, heartbreak, betrayal, the loss of those closest to him. But this wasn't about survival. This was about memory. About choices he made long ago that were coming back, not with regret, but with revenge. Behind him, Lucy slept lightly on a bench, her duffel bag used as a pillow. Dalton was oiling an old chain and muttering about how Reese used to be one of them, back when he smiled more and shouted less. Old Crow sat in a corner, carving slow patterns into his cane, as if leaving behind a record in wood. At 3:47 a.m., the first sound came, not an engine. Not a scream, just a flicker of orange light on the horizon. Fire. Keanu saw it before anyone else. He didn't panic, didn't shout. He simply turned to Old Crow and nodded once. Old Crow whispered, "He's here." The fire wasn't wild. It wasn't meant to destroy buildings. It was controlled, lit in a metal drum strapped to the back of Reese Milton's bike. The bike roared down the empty street like a ghost with purpose, flames trailing behind in a long tail of intimidation. Behind him followed two more bikes, smaller, faster, and covered in graffiti. Reese wore all black leather, a red bandana covering half his face, and thick gloves. His helmet was absent. He wanted them to see his face, his anger, his scars. He parked in front of the tavern and revved once. Then silence. Keanu walked to the door, hand on the knob. Dalton touched his shoulder. "Let me talk to him." Keanu shook his head. "He's not here for you." Lucy stirred and sat up. "Be careful. Always," Keanu whispered. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the cool, smoky morning. Reese leaned on his bike, lighting a cigarette from the flame in the barrel behind him. He didn't smile. didn't nod. He just stared. I thought you'd hide, Reese said after a moment. That's not who I am, Keanu replied calmly. Funny, Reese said, flicking the cigarette. You acted like you cared. Gave me that talk on set about respect, about working for it, but then you let them kick me out like I was trash. Keanu nodded slowly. You tried to steal another man's gear, Reese. I didn't vote for you to be fired, but I couldn't stop them either. Reese took a step forward. But you didn't fight for me. Keanu didn't look away. You're right. I didn't fight hard enough. Reese was stunned for a second. Rage needs resistance. When it finds remorse instead, it falters. You think that makes it okay now? Reese asked, voice shaking. You think that erases everything? Nothing erases anything, Keanu replied. But everything begins with owning the truth. So, you're just here to apologize? Reese spat. Keanu walked closer. Not afraid, not angry, just present. I'm here to stop you from ruining the life you have left. Reese's face twisted. What life? Hollywood blacklisted me. My own brother disowned me. I sleep in the back of a gas station with rats and ghosts. Keanu nodded again. Then rebuild. Rebuild? Reese laughed bitterly. You have no idea how hard it is. You think you suffered, Reeves. You still had money, fame, fans. What did I have? Keanu's voice dropped, almost breaking. I had a wife, a daughter, both gone. I went home to silence every night for years, no hand, to hold, no footsteps. I know what it means to lose everything. Reese staggered slightly as if the words struck harder than a punch. So why are you still standing, he asked. Keanu took one deep breath. Because I kept choosing to, one day at a time. Reese didn't speak. He looked past Keanu now, toward the bar where Old Crow stood in the doorway, Lucy behind him and even Bruno watching, quietly holding a phone in his hand. Not recording, just holding it. You think I care what they see? Reese shouted. They don't know what I've been through. Keanu took another step forward. Then tell them, but not with fire, with truth. For the first time, Reese's eyes softened. Not much, but enough. Then one of the bikers behind him revved his engine. You want us to go in? Reese didn't answer immediately. Keanu looked at the young man. What's your name? The biker blinked. Tanner. Tanner, Keanu said. You don't need to follow someone into darkness to feel important. Tanner hesitated. Reese turned to him. Don't listen to him. He's just playing the saint. Keanu's voice didn't rise. I'm not a saint. I'm just a man who made 1,000 mistakes. But I stopped letting them control me. Tanner shut off his engine. Reese spun around. What are you doing? I'm tired, man, Tanner said. This ain't what I signed up for. Keanu turned back to Reese. You're not alone. Not unless you choose to be. Reese stared at him for a long time. The fire in the barrel began to dim. Dawn crept across the sky in pale streaks, and the sound of birds, not engines, rose in the distance. Then Reese did something no one expected. He took off his jacket, dropped it on the ground, and walked away from his bike. Keanu didn't stop him. No one did. But just as Reese reached the edge of the road, he paused. Look back once. I don't forgive you, he said. Keanu nodded. You don't have to. Just forgive yourself. And then Reese walked into the rising sun. Keanu exhaled. Lucy stepped outside, tears in her eyes. You didn't fight him, she said. I didn't need to, Keanu answered. He was already fighting himself. Dalton came out next. What now? Keanu looked up at the sky. Now, he said, we build something better. But deep down, Keanu knew. Not all storms disappear forever. Some wait, some remember. When the quiet becomes legend, the sky over Marlow turned gold by 7 a.m. Not the soft pastel of a peaceful morning, but a rich, defiant gold that glowed through the tavern windows like a badge of survival. The storm had passed, but the weight of it still lingered in the bones of everyone who'd witnessed what happened outside the Red Jug. Reese Milton was gone, vanished down the sunlit highway with no clear destination. His flame had burned wild for years, and KeanuReeves hadn't extinguished it with fists or fury, but with something far rarer, understanding. He'd looked rage in the eye and didn't meet it with more rage. He simply stood, steady, until the fire collapsed under its own emptiness. Inside, Lucy brewed fresh coffee. The scent filled the old bar like hope sneaking in through the floorboards. The jukebox stayed off. No one felt like playing music yet. The regulars were quiet, not out of fear, but reverence. Something sacred had happened. Not the kind of sacred you find in a church, but the kind you feel when you see a man choose peace when he had every right to fight. Keanu sat at the same stool he had the night before, sipping tea again. His hands were steady. His hoodie was still dusted with the ash from Reese's fire drum. But his eyes, they were different. Not tired, not broken, just clear. Dalton walked up beside him and set down a plate of eggs he'd scrambled himself in the back. Never thought I'd see a man stop a riot with his voice. Keanu smiled. You stopped it too, just by not feeding it. Dalton shrugged. I wanted to fight, felt it crawling up my spine. But when I saw you standing there, still, it made me ashamed of how many times I let my fists speak instead of my mind. Keanu looked at him. You weren't wrong to feel that way. You just chose not to let the feeling own you. You think Reese will be okay? Dalton asked after a moment. Keanu looked out the window, where the last of the smoke had dissolved into the sky. If he lets go of who he thought he had to, Fos maybe. Lucy walked over holding a note. He left this in the mailbox out front. Keanu took it, unfolded the paper. A short message handwritten in shaky letters. You were right. It wasn't about you. It was about me. Thank you for not making me a villain when I'd already made myself one. Reese. Keanu folded the note quietly and tucked it into his jacket. Old Crow entered the bar walking slowly, a small bag of herbs in one hand. He handed it to the bartender without a word and sat beside Keanu. I saw what you did, Old Crow said. My grandfather used to say, the strongest man is the one who can carry the pain of another without adding more weight. Keanu nodded. Sometimes you don't know how much you're carrying until someone else sets theirs down. Old Crow smiled. Your journey brought you here for a reason. Keanu looked at him, not with confusion, but quiet curiosity. What do you mean? Old Crow pointed toward Lucy. You helped her mother once. Then you helped her. You think that's random? Keanu glanced at Lucy, who smiled at him over her coffee cup. Old Crow went on. You weren't just passing through. You were sent here by something bigger than any of us. Keanu took that in slowly. I don't think I believe in fate. You don't have to, Old Crow said. But it believes in you. That night, the Red Jug Tavern was reborn. They didn't fix the cracks in the floor. They didn't replace the flickering light. They didn't repaint the chipped signs, but the people changed. Bruno started helping the bartender after hours. Dalton opened a small garage next door, offering free repairs on Saturdays for people who couldn't pay. Lucy stayed longer than she planned, eventually renting a small studio above the general store. She started writing again. Poems, stories, truths. And Keanu, he stayed too. Not forever, but longer than anyone thought he would. Some nights he told stories, real ones, about loss, about movies, about people who taught him things in quiet ways. Other nights he just sat near the jukebox and listened to the silence like it was a symphony. People came from nearby towns just to see if the stories were true. Is he really here? Is it true he stopped a gang with just his words? Did he really make a man cry and thank him in the same minute? No one ever answered the questions directly. They didn't have to. Because KeanuReeves didn't become a legend in Marlow by being famous. He became one by being kind, and kindness in a world so full of noise was the rarest kind of power. Weeks passed. Then one day, Keanu packed a bag, hugged Lucy, shook Dalton's hand and told the bartender to keep the tea shelf stocked. Where are you going? Lucy asked. Somewhere someone needs me, he said with a small smile. She nodded. You'll know when you get there. As he stepped out onto the road, a boy riding past on a bicycle shouted, Hey, you're Keanu Reeves. Keanu turned, lifted his hand and said, Sometimes. The boy smiled and rode off. Keanu walked toward the rising sun, same as Reese once had, but this time, it wasn't about leaving something behind. It was about carrying something forward. Not fame, not history, just a lesson. A man walked into a bar once. Quiet. Unnoticed. Mocked. He walked out having changed lives, not with noise, but with silence.